Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to my podcast today. Today, we're going to educate you on everything you need to know about the muscular system. The topics we're going to cover today include the microscopic anatomy of the muscle, sliding filament theory and neuromuscular junction, and an overview of some of the most common muscular disorders. And we're also going to touch on some of the fewest common muscles as well. Okay, let's start off with a muscular overview. The aim of a muscle is to convert chemical energy into mechanical energy. The ability for muscles to contract depends on two types of microfilaments. So the four characteristics of muscle tissue include excitability, contractability, extensibility, and elasticity. Excitability is the ability to receive and respond to a stimulus. For example, when someone tries to hit you with a baseball bat and you flinch, that is an example. Contractability is the ability to shorten, and extensibility is the ability to stretch. Elasticity, on the other hand, is the ability to go back to its resting position after contraction or stretching. So there's three different types of muscles. Let's start off with skeletal muscle. This is attached by tendons to the bones, and it is the most common muscle tissue in the body. It's voluntary, meaning you can control it. It's striding, meaning it has visible banding. It has a long cylindrical shape, and it also multinucleated. Epimysium is what attaches the muscle to bones and cartilage. Endomysium is what holds bunches of muscle fibers. Examples include deltoid and abductor muscles. Another type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. This is found only in the heart. It's involuntary control, which means you can't control it. It's striding as well, which means it's visible banding. And it makes up the myocardium of the heart. These cells are short, branching, and single nucleus, and the cells connect with one another at interlocated discs. Finally, we have smooth muscles. This is located in internal organs, such as the hollow internal organs, such as the stomach and large and small intestine and urinary bladder. It's contrary to the other ones, it is short, spindle-shaped, and it's single nucleus cells. And this has no striations, no visible banding, and this has extreme extensibility, which really means it's very stretchy. Okay, now let's move on to the actual a microscopic anatomy of the muscle tissue. So first off, we got the tendon, which connects the bone to the muscle. I created a diagram, as you can see, which I've already explained, but I will be going over again as well. So the tendon connects the bone to the muscle. Okay, next we have epimysium, which contains the many fascicles of muscle fibers, and inside of that, there's the perimysium, which surrounds each bundle of muscle fibers, and the individual muscle fiber is surrounded by endomysium. So it's basically one thing inside of another thing inside of another thing. That's the way you can easily understand it. As well, there's also blood vessels, which help transport nutrients and oxygen. And over on here, we have an expanded view of the muscle fiber, which I will be explaining. The Z disc or Z line is the zigzag pattern that defines the boundaries of the muscle sarcomere. The H zone is in the center of the A band, where there is no overlap between the thick and thin filaments. Essentially, the H zone only consists of thick filaments. The thin dark line across the center of the H zone is known as the M band or M line, and the I band is a pale band across a striated muscle fiber that consists of actin. Sarcomere is the unit of striated muscle tissue between the two Z lines, as mentioned. It features thin actin filament, elastic titin filament, and thick myosin filament as well. Okay, now let me explaining the neuromuscular junction and sliding filament theory. So first off, the neuromuscular junction is a synaptic connection between the terminal and the motor nerve and the muscle. It's a site for transmission of action potential from nerve to the muscle. It is also the site of many diseases and a site of action for many pharmacological drugs. So first step is the nerve impulses arrive at the axon terminal of motor neuron and triggers the release of acetylcholine ACH. And the ACH diffuses, binds to its receptors and triggers muscle action potential. The acetylcholine destroys ACH, so more action potentials don't arise. Then the AP travels along the T-tubule, opens Ca2 plus calcium ion and channels in the SR. The calcium enters into the sacroplasm. The Ca2 plus binds to the troponin. The Ca2 plus channels close and calcium transport pumps use ATP to restore low levels of calcium in sacroplasm. And troponin complex returns to original position to block myosin binding sites on actin. And finally, the muscle relaxes. So now I'll be explaining sliding filament theory. The sliding filament theory was discovered by Gene Hansen and Hugh Hursley. The theory explains how muscles in the human body contract to produce force. They noticed changes in the sarcomeres as muscle tissue shortened. During a contraction, they noticed one zone repeating the same sarcomere arrangement, which remained relatively constant in length, and this specific zone was called the A band. The sarcomere is when muscle cells are viewed under a microscope. Is striped patterns are observed, essentially what I explained earlier with the striations. Individual sarcomeres, I want to add on to this, also consist of many parallel myosin and actin filaments. So the first step of the sliding filament theory of muscle contraction, the impulse arrives at the neuromuscular joint. Calcium 2 plus ion, Ca2 plus released from the sacroplasmic reticulum. The Ca2 plus attaches to the troponin, causing it to move. The tropomyosin moves, and the myosin binding sites are exposed. Next, step 2 is the calcium ions bind to the troponin, which causes the troponin to drag topomyosin off the crossbridge binding sites. Crossbridges bind to the actin. And for step 3, the myosin heads nudge forward, pulling actin filament over the myosin. Step 4, ATP binds to the myosin head, the crossbridge breaks, and myosin detaches from the actin. Step 5 is the muscle fiber lengthens and relaxes. And finally, step 6 is calcium ions actively pumped back into the endoplasmic reticulum. Troponin is released from the tropomyosin, and tropomyosin covers crossbridges linking sites. Binding sites. Okay, that covers the neuromuscular junction and sliding filament theory. Now on to the muscles that are kind of the most important and the ones we need to know. So let's start off with the facial muscles. This includes zygomaticus, temporalis, orbicularis oculi. Essentially, what we need to know about these facial muscles is that they have two functions, including facial expression and mastication. And mastication basically means the ability for your muscles to chew food. Okay. Now moving on to the neck muscles, which is the sternohyoid. The purpose of this muscle is to stop food from going the wrong pipe. It closes the airways so food doesn't get inhaled. This is an example of an involuntary action or involuntary muscle, right? Now moving on, we have the shoulder. This includes the trapezius, the deltoid, and the latissimus dorsi. The the shoulder has about 8 muscles that attach to the scapula, humerus, and clavicle, basically. And the muscle in the shoulder, they basically help engage in the wide array of movement and help protect the main shoulder joint, which is the geonohumeral joint. Okay, moving down, we have the thorax, which includes the pectoralis minor, pectoralis major, the intercostalis, and muscles in the anterior thorax. These help provide movement to the arm. Essentially, all these muscles they in the thorax they help provide more movement with your arm basically, while the muscles in the posterior thorax help with breathing and reinforce the thoracic wall. So what you need to know is that the posterior thorax is different function than the anterior thorax. Moving down, we have the arms. Muscles include the triceps brachii, which help extend the elbow joint and stabilize the shoulder. The biceps brachii, which is the prime mover for forearm supination. The brachioradialis, which help with flex of the forearm or the elbow. The flexor carpi radialis, which the function of this is to provide the flexion of help flex the wrist essentially and assist in the abduction of the arm and wrist. In the abdomen, we have external obliques. The external oblique helps pull the chest downwards and compress the abdominal cavity. Then we have the internal obliques, which is on the inside. External is on the outside, which is important for movements of the trunk, maintaining normal abdominal tension, and increasing intra-abdominal pressure. And finally, we have the rectus abdominis, which the main action for the rectus abdominis, the flex of the trunk, essentially the flex of the thoracic and lumbar spine. Moving down, we have the thighs and includes rectus femoris, which acts as a knee extender, and we also include the tensor fasciae latae. The tensor fasciae latae works with the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus muscles to abduct and rotate the femur. And moving on to the hips, we have the gluteus medius, as mentioned earlier, which works to provide the rotation of the thighs from the center of the body, which basically allows you to walk steadily, really. And it also includes the gluteus maximus, which works with other muscles in this area to extend the hip. Moving downwards, we have the leg. It includes the anterior, the tibialis anterior, the gastrocnemius calf, which is the calf, and the calcaneal, which is the Achilles tendon. In general, the muscles of this compartment help the flex of the forward in upward direction at the ankle and also extend the toes. And finally, we have the hamstring, which includes the bicep femoris, and this aids in the flex of the knee and also helps with hip extension. Okay, finally, we're gonna cover the few of the muscle disorders that are important and we have to know. First one is muscular dystrophy. This is a hereditary condition that causes the progressive weakening and wasting of your muscles, and this is most common in the most common one of muscular dystrophy is called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is common and it is also hereditary. So that means you can't catch it from it runs in the family. Essentially, is what it means. Another muscular disorder is muscle fatigue. With this, moving on, we got muscle fatigue, which is when the muscle is unable to contract or it just weakly contracts. Muscle cramp, on the other hand, is a sudden involuntary shortening, which could be caused by lack of blood supply, water, or potassium. Muscle sprains typically involve the tendons and ligaments, and strains involve the muscle belly and essentially the middle of them. And these both have 3 grades between 1 to 3 to determine how much the tissue is damaged. And with all this, we have covered the whole muscular system, all the important things, everything you need to know about. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. And yeah.